Hello, welcome to the third video in our series of functional strength training workouts. To give you an idea of how to put together complicated multiple joint exercises and still keep your program balanced. So phase one was quite sort of simple movements. Phase two introduced weight shifting for the first time, which sort of brought in like more dynamic sort of left to right and right to left type movements. This time it brings in a lot more speed. So this time sort of following on from the previous two, but with a lot more complication, and the only way to get these right is to do them quickly. So this very first one is quite a simple one, but it sort of sets the foundation of the things to come. So basically it's a kind of like a single leg movement that's not really, again, and it's kind of a weight shifting but not really. Alright, so I'm basically like doing a single leg RDL, but not with slow tempo, with fast tempo, using the dumbbells like a pendulum to create like that fast explosive movement of the hips thrusting forward. So basically here would be, if like in the previous program we had this as a single leg exercise, which was done very slowly for obvious reasons, or you lose control. But basically I'm in a RDL. So the first program we had 2-leg RDL, second we had a single leg. This time it's kind of really 1.5 leg, but the difference with this one and the other two was the speed of the movement. So to get out of this, it's basically my hip having to thrust forward. So it really, the glutes are obviously a big part of this, but the momentum and the timing and the body position is also a big part. So it's just a lot of moving parts. This is the simple version. The band, which if you've seen previous videos, the purpose of the band is to try and help engage the glute max a bit more effectively than, because this can be sometimes dominated by the glute medius, which is good, but the glute max is obviously typically a lot weaker and a lot more dysfunctional and leads to bigger problems, especially through the hip, the lower back, and even the knee. So the band is just a sneaky way to try and bring in that extra bit of extension phase so that it doesn't get as lazy. All right, so it's really basically this part here where my leg is moving in the air and backwards, so my hip is pulling the band backward. All right, so which would be more of a factor later on in one of the other exercises that looks very similar to this. All right. So again, the dumbbells are really just to create extra momentum, to give me more power to get out of this point here where my left leg is really having to work hard. All right, so it's not an upper body movement at all. It's just really taking advantage of momentum. All right, so I try to do 3 sets of 8 to 12 reps, and again, like all the other times, it's really effective trying to superset this with a similar or an opposing type of exercise that doesn't compromise everything that you were trying to do there. Now this one, this follows on from the single cable push that we had last time in the previous program where we had the weight shifting. This just takes the weight shifting to an extra degree because it really forces a hell of a lot more speed and a lot more complication with it. So it basically takes what was originally an upper body exercise and kind of converts it into a lower body exercise. So we'll play it through. This one mimics a throwing action. So I've got to really explode out of the blocks at this point here. So that's a good point to freeze it, because you can really see how much work this leg is really driving of the whole thing. This is the key to the whole thing. The arm, it looks like it's the main thing, but because it's got the weight and pushing it, but really everything is driven by this leg and my core staying tight so that I don't get pulled into the machine. So it's got to be like my core here is actually creating stiffness, and then in a second it's actually got to help assist the movement, so transferring the strength from the leg into the arm. So this is the anterior sling at work. And the last part, because it has an added follow-through part to it, is that part there where the right leg is actually a part of a driving leg. So it actually has to do part of the work of me continuing to push around. It just happens so quickly you don't really notice it. So a lot more difficult exercise than it looks, this one. You sometimes have to lower the weight from what you would have done on the easier version, just until you get your skill and your timing just right, or otherwise, you might find it's too heavy, even though your arm literally just pushed the easier version. All right, so now this time I'm driving off my right hand into my left leg, and I feel weirdly stronger with my left hand on this, because I think I know my left leg's not as strong. So on that point where I have to really almost run over the leg, I don't feel quite as stable, and it doesn't give me enough power to push through. You can see there, kind of lost it on that one. All right, so again, I might bring the reps down on this. Might only do 6 to 8 reps tops. Where other ones I'm doing 8 to 12 reps. So I do those first 2 exercises as a superset of three times. So I do the first one 8 to 12, and then that one 6 to 8. Have a rest for a minute, do them again. Have a rest, do them again. All right. So once I've done that, then I'm going to move on to the next one, which kind of follows on from the very first one. It just adds the upper body component to it. All right. So now I'm in this stance phase where I've got to step forward with the right leg. So now I'm really working posterior sling, where previously I just worked anterior sling. Now I'm working through the glutes on this other side with a pulling action, where previously I was working a pushing action and probably more quadriceps adductors. All right, so now this one's got a real drive back, and this also, that leg that comes into the air, that right leg actually steps back a bit further. So this also engages that glute max on the hip extension this direction, and now the actual weight is on my left leg. So this is where you see the weight shifting coming into it again. So a great exercise, a lot harder than it looks, and you see how the dumbbell gives me that momentum. So it's helping to drive the hips forward, and the left arm pulling is engaging lats and all the back muscles. So I've really got a lot of muscles on the job here. So it's an extremely exhausting exercise, and it more or less opposes the one we just did a minute ago. All right, so I get 8 to 12 reps on one side, and then I do 8 to 12 on the other side. And again, you probably might notice if there's weaknesses within one leg. Sometimes it's the timing and the coordination. Sometimes it's just purely muscle weakness. All right, so this sort of, it's a lot easier than the pushing one. Always pulling ones are a lot easier to get right. So now I'm really driving off my left leg, which again, like on the previous one, I didn't feel as good pushing over it. This time I don't feel as good loading it up and pushing back. Even though my right hand is the more powerful and I'm more coordinated right-handed, I don't feel quite as good on this one as I do on the previous one, and it's all to do with the legs. So it's interesting how things change once the speed changes, because on the slow ones it's the other way around. I feel better with the right hand when it feels more upper body dominating, but when it becomes lower body, that same movement feels nowhere near as efficient. All right, so this is why these are great to change. They're really difficult progressions to get right at times, and it just takes a bit of practice to get them right. All right, so this next one, this is a sort of another basically follows on from the previous one, where I'm going to have that same action again, but now I'm going to be changing directions. So I'm going to be using that dumbbell to switch around from right to left, and I'll get this added sort of core rotation part where it's going vertically instead of just horizontally like the previous two. A lot of eccentric control on this one. It's almost like an agility exercise. The momentum of the dumbbell really drags you into it. So at this point here where I have to control the momentum that I'm actually exploding there, but now I've got to actually brake and slow it down. So it's quite a unique one in that regard, as opposed to that previous two were more about the explosiveness. This one's more about the actual braking and the control. And obviously I'm getting that overhead thing for the first time, where all the previous ones I'm just working in horizontal patterns. So this first time I'm sort of going up into over my head. So a lot more different. Both of them in their own right quite tiring. I could use many varieties there, but again, that's just to give you some ideas of how I'm breaking these things up with some pushing, some pulling, forward and backward, and now I'm actually going to be going sideways. So normally I'd use like a torsionator thing to lock this in, but to show you how you could do this without one, just use the edge of a bench or a corner of a wall. So now I'm going to be using a squatting pattern. So most of the ones I've used so far are like lunging, sort of split squat type bending movements. This time is like a squatting action, and now I'm going to be moving in a sideways, in a lateral direction. So now I'm loading up in left hand, left leg, right leg, and again the timing of this has to be fast. If I'm not fast enough, I just won't have the time to get around. It gets really jerky and awkward. So you know, it's just a lot different to the previous ones where we didn't quite have these explosive speeds being used, and this is where the movement efficiency really gets into it. So the strength in that was needed to get to this stage, but the strength is kind of not as relevant as power, and the power is what really ties it together and makes you just move so well when you really get the hang of them. All right, they're very exhausting though. So again, I'd bring in, again, I could use lots of different things. This is just to give you an idea. So I'm sort of focusing on a lateral movement. I'm going to go back to the cable machine again. I'm going to use like a wood chop that goes from low to high. So previously I've done the high to low one, which was the easy one. Now the low to high one brings the legs into it more, and very much that sort of baseball, golf swing, cricket, whatever you want to call it, it looks very much specifically like that because the legs are the driver. You know, it's quite a simple exercise in many ways, but it's amazing how tiring this can be and how effective it can be really at getting your legs involved. And you can see how like I have to really load the left leg, and then that hip really rotates through. See how it really drives through, and I'm pivoting on this foot because I need this internal rotation of the hip to get my whole core around and follow through. So again, it looks like it's the arms that are working, but really it's the legs. And obviously the core is a big part because my hands are so far in front of me. So here you can see how I'm going to transfer from right leg now and then over to the left leg, and hands right out away from my body. So I'm creating that lever which creates the stress on the core, and very, very tiring exercise. A lot of people really get quite puffed and sweaty from this. Also the load that you would use is a lot less on this one than you would on the high to low, just because you don't have that mechanical advantage to get it right. But so far we've got like 6 exercises. Each one of them, probably apart from the first one, was not that hard, but the other 5 are all very, very exhausting. All right, so great way to sort of bring in your to sort of put it all together, and you could mix and match some of them from all 3 workouts and it would all be good. Just always remember to try to get something that's like a pushing or a pulling, a bending, a squatting, a lunging and a twisting, and the gait ones sort of all get into it at the end here because you're on the move all the time. All these ones on the move always bring the gait pattern into it, and that's usually the one that's the most hardest to get right, needs like speed at times for it to be efficient. You know, and it really ties it all together. So that's really the object, is try to get that one working. If you can do that, you should be able to, you know, be able to do a lot of things and really develop your strength and your fitness all at the same time. All right. So I hope that gives you a few ideas, and we'll see you on our next video.